Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us again for another podcast. We are still going to be discussing family assistance, but we have somebody very, very special with us today. Somebody that I've known for a number of years, and I'm excited to have him share his experiences and tell a little about himself. But I present to you Mr. Roger Girouard, coming to us from Souk, British Columbia in Canada. Such a beautiful part of the world, Roger. I think they say where the forest meets the sea because of
Yeah,
the
it's
old growth
Esquimalt.
forest.
It's where the forest meets the sea. So, hi, everybody. Welcome to the West Coast.
So please tell us a little about yourself, your background, and how you ended up here.
Sure thing, Barbara, and thanks for having me on. I'm a Montreal boy. Grew up there and had a great set of parents that had gone through World War II, and from that point on, everything was easy for them. Except when I came along, I was one of those rough and tumble lads. 9 years between my sister and I. She's the elder, and they never stopped trying. So something in the stars worked as far as they were concerned. And got a wonderful upbringing, got a really solid sense of values, and learned from my dad that one of the things that we do when we walk the earth is we're here to make a difference, and I really hoisted that in. It's basically his philosophy is you draw breath to make a difference in the world. And his story was he left Canada in 1938 to go fend off Nazism. I mean, how good a story to inherit values can you have other than that? My interest was maritime. I kept on wondering where those ships at the harbor went, and a few years later I joined the Navy reserves when I was 16, and then right after high school straight in, and so grew up in that system. Pretty demanding, lots of value oriented, occasional bit of yelling now and then, but that was the culture in those days. But I had a natural affinity and talent for driving ships, and lo and behold, I also had a pretty good touch with people. So my technical skills and my leadership skills kind of ran the foundation of me having a really solid career. There's something going right when the chiefs like you. It's all right when the officers like you, but when the chiefs think you're okay, there's something going on with your character. And I'm lucky to have had great support, great mentors from chiefs, officers, and a couple of my mentors have died in this last couple of years. A couple of admirals that really taught me what it was like and what it was about. Did that. Had some interesting times, a couple of Gulf tours, some big emergency management enterprises. And as you know, I was the lead operator for the Navy in Halifax during the Swiss Air event, which was, bigger than all of us. I think as an operation, it was a success. Sadly, it was a tragedy for the passengers, but we took, and I took, a real strong focus of taking care of the families. And, the motivation to my team was, what would you want done if you were one of them? A truly empathetic approach to it. And that empathetic approach guided my career through Navy. I went off and retired at age 50 for various reasons and taught for a bit. And then I got the itch again and came and did a Coast Guard stint for 10 years. Another enterprise. It's operationally oriented. You're dependent on the skills and the values and the courage of your people. And I just finished that stint last year. I had a wonderful time, exerting my leadership, which, in that particular slot was your job is to give your people all the equipment that you can to do the job right. And I feel pretty strongly that we did that right. And Canadian Coast Guard at that time was coming out of its shell, fiscal shell more than anything here in Canada. And we were offered opportunities to show our worth, and whether it was an oil spill or loss of life at sea, we really turned to try and perform successfully, effectively, but also because of some of the social aspects here in BC, particularly Indigenous nations wanting to have more say, have more presence, have more capability. We leaned into that as well, and we started growing these local auxiliaries. They really existed. They were homegrown, but our job was to connect, grow, invest, and we bought equipment. We had exercises, and I mean my philosophy was you don't want to have day one of an emergency not knowing the people you're working with. And so we went up and down the coast slowly, grassroots, talking to chief and council, saying, "What do you think your relationship with the Coast Guard could be? What do you need, chief? What keeps you awake at night? And then how do we solve those problems together, with an eye to community self-reliance, improved knowledge, improved safety skills. When you're dealing with an oil spill, you got to think safety first." And the not only growing a network, but the capability of doing an emergency read incident command system. And so for 9 years, we really worked hard to do that. And I'm proud to say a 3-nation auxiliary is now pushing 12 nations, and the sense of confidence and I'd say trust, at least with the on-water people of Coast Guard, has improved markedly. And the coast is better for it. There are people not dying because of this, and there's nothing better to leave as a legacy than that.
Fabulous.
So that's what I did for a hobby for a few years, Barb.
A few years. And once again, this man is humble. For those of you that have not had the good fortune of meeting Roger in person, he was a former Rear Admiral of the Canadian Navy and then finished his career as the Assistant Commissioner of the Canadian Coast Guard. So when he talks about leadership, he led a very large and prestigious group on both sides of the military. So thank you for your service to Canada.
Well, thanks, Barbara. And it goes back to my first tenet: you're here to make a difference. And leadership to me was always about servant leadership. You collect the best talent you can, you grow them as best as you possibly can, and you watch and wonder as they excel beyond what they ever expected, but you knew they could.
Mm-hmm. Well, and true to what you have just spoken, you used a quote in our conversation yesterday where we talked, and you said humble matters and the importance of the community in any type of a response. So could you elaborate a bit on that? Because it was fascinating.
Yeah, it's part of my leadership philosophy. Back to servant leadership, back to recognizing, when you're the boss, you got power and you got clout. And, for a lot of times I had this really big uniform, and I'm a larger than life kind of dude sometimes as well. But I learned, actually, when I was in my leadership course at Royal Roads, there was a gal who had a challenge with me because I was so big. And she kindly came to me and said, "Can you just tone it down a tad? Because you can intimidate." And I didn't know that, And it was a lesson I learned about a bit of the self-control, but always tying back to the fundamental is it's not about me. It's not about my position. It's about us and how do we get things done. And you'll recognize when a crisis incident occurs, people are raw, they're emotional, they're in a very tough place, and the last thing they need is left, right, left, let's go, men, rah kind of thing. Folks actually need a softer touch, and for me that was walk in the room, do more listening than talking, get a feel, get a vibe, get a sense of what the issues really are. The operation, will deploy and will take care of itself, and the people in the ICS or the people on the water or in the hotel doing their their logistics, that'll all happen. But what you really need to focus on is growing an understanding, empathetic relationship with the people who've been impacted, to help them find a sense of calm, to help them have a sense of hope, and to help them find their voice in this very complex and for very many very new environment. I mean, I've been in a lot of operations room over the years, and they're all very familiar and handy. And look at that cool kit, and look at those people doing magic. Um, if you've never been in an ICS, if you can't spell ICS, but you're called upon to participate, that's daunting. That's intimidating. And certainly with some of the small First Nations communities, we saw some wonderful folks. I think gal Jessup and Bella Bella, she was chosen by her community to be the representative in the command post, to be one of the leads, and wide-eyed and frankly almost terrified. We wrapped ourselves around her. I gave her an advisor to translate all the jargon and why do we do it this way, and if she had an issue, he'd take it for her, so she didn't have to fight through the chemistry in a room till she got herself established. And it was a really wonderful thing to see, but it was rooted in a humble approach to being in charge, leading from behind. Like, I don't have to be up in front. Things will happen. That community needs to be in charge of itself. We need to let it voice its priorities and concerns, and just being sensitive and adaptive to that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. One of the other areas that we talked about had to do with building relationships within the community. And I know you certainly did that. And that's how I first met you. I had been conducting a recurrent training of family assistance out in, I think it was Victoria was the first location. And a station manager had said there was a gentleman that could speak from the military, and you came into the room, and like you say, you had such presence, and you were dressed in your full military uniform, and my jaw hit the desk, as did the other 5 or 6 people that we had in the room, because we were such a small group, to have the Rear Admiral of the Canadian Navy addressing my care team at that point. And then when you volunteered to do that again for us in Vancouver, again, I was just awestruck that somebody in your position would take the time out of your schedule to do that for us. So certainly that obviously was how you lived your career. But tell me a bit more about how you've been building the community relationships within different organizations and within certain First Nations groups in Canada.
Yeah, for sure. And it is about relationships. And, as a military guy, you exercise. You're always doing things to hone your skills, your endurance, your physicality, your technical talents. Those exercises need to go beyond your own organization. It's all well and good that you know each other, you're having coffee anyway, but you have to ask yourself, and who else plays in this scenario or that scenario? Or I'll take you back again to Swiss Air. Dark and stormy night. The next morning, we're still doing search and rescue. I get a call from the province. The RCMP shows up because of was this a crime? And 72 hours later, we're still at it, trying to figure out where this airplane went. We've got, I want to say, 32 organizations under our roof, most of which we had not met, except for one element. And the year before, there had been a big naval exercise out of Halifax. We included the provincial reps, and we included a couple of the industrial players, and we also included the Canadian Coast Guard. Those relationships that we had built in that exercise showed up instantaneously as we all coagulated in our headquarters, right after the crash. And it was, oh, I know you. Oh, and so the trust factor was already being knit, and they knew 2 people, and they brought in, and so it became a very large but coherent team very quickly. And so, as I said earlier, you don't want to show up at an emergency on day one not knowing who you're working with. And so um, back to my BC example, we really wanted to go out and make relationships, um, probably nodal districts, regions, go up to a place called Port Alberni and get the district manager and the RCMP there and the ambulance attendants. Um, Failure of doing that, best example I can give you is here very early in my watch, it was the first year. We had an oil spill in Vancouver where a vessel, the Marathassa, a grain carrier, came in and had a technical problem, put a whole bunch of bunker oil into Vancouver Harbor. And Vancouver, it's a capital, or it's a regional district with, I want to say, 17 municipalities. And every municipality wanted in, every municipality wanted to be a leader in the command post, and no agreements, it was a zoo. And what we basically ran was the political layer and the operational layer. And they'd connect and we'd inform, but a lot of the time the political layer was just off in a different places. This is, as is wont in some urgencies. And we got through it. It wasn't a major spill in terms of impact. No birds died. That's my measure. But we realized that we couldn't endure another one like that. It was an operational success, but it was a relationship and political failure. And right after it was complete, as we were shutting down the command post, which was its own challenges, as I'm sure you recognize sometimes, we guaranteed that we would be back, do a hot wash, an assessment, and we did that, and then we moved straight into an organizational planning process for the city of Vancouver. If there was another on-water emergency, whatever it was, this is how we would handle it using the incident command process, and this is how we would decide who was in the command post. And we created this thing called the Greater Vancouver Integrated Response Plan. It took us a year, not surprisingly, a bit of tension on day one, but a year later, we were actually all colleagues. And I had some wonderful folks. I had a great gal who had come up in the emergency management business, was not coasty because we had to find an honest broker. We took a human approach to it. We weren't in charge of this. The community was. Back to humility. And we created this 150-page document that the rest of the country said, hey, that's pretty good. We don't have those. Nobody had one. And so here's this crisis that gave us the motivation, the impetus, but the answer was relationship, revisiting that through exercises, which we've done a multiple number of times now. And it's kind of like, oh, let's have our reunion and let's do something good with it. And what have we learned and what's changed? And it's just been a really solid evolution of the network, the fabric of marine safety, and the building of a community amongst communities. And we've started replicating that in other nodes up and down the coast. Prince Rupert, the other big harbor, being one as well. And so what's happened is Coast Guard, with its exercise agenda, has become the backbone for the strengthening of capability up and down the coast. Pretty cool.
Very, very. And it's interesting to see how relationships form and how small our world is, because I know that Sharon Bryson, who is also a member of the board at Go Crisis, she remembered you from Swiss Air because she had been with the NTSB and you had been an incident commander during the Swiss Air disaster. So it's really fascinating to see how we all intersect at different times in our lives.
Yeah, Swiss Air was really formative for me. It was pre-ICS, although there were modules at the time. The Navy took the leadership role because we could. And TSB doesn't have command control power. RCMP is capable but small. We were the ones who could run a big operation, particularly on the marine side. And I had multiple roles. I was I was the incident commander for the Navy. I ran the operations center. I was on that group of 32. We ran a daily brief. It was an operational oversight board, for want of another term, way too big for a plans meeting. But my boss decided, because I knew everything that was going on, I was a liaison of the families, and so my motivation to move stuff and do things right and to do everything that we could came right from the coalface of talking with the families. And that's a long story all by itself. I was never so happy that I had read On Death and Dying as when I walked into the Lord Nelson to brief the families. And I felt a little sorry for myself, because we had about 8 different organizations, and we had the chief medical examiner, and I was told, Raj, you're the SAR guy. You're going to have to tell the families that had flown in from everywhere, and this was the first night they had all been in the hotel, including the families from Zurich, and you're going to be the one who has to tell them that there are no survivors, and that's not an easy thing with an audience of 400 people. And I, like I said, I was feeling a little sorry for myself. And then John Butt was the one who said, and I'm sorry, folks, but I won't be asking you to identify any of your family members. That's not going to be possible. And the oxygen just left the room, and that was where we all understood how big this tragedy was and how much work we had to do, not only for the investigation, but what we had to do to support the families who had just been given the shock of a lifetime.
And Dr. Butt was the medical examiner, was he not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the quotes that you said was that families are not chattel and they are not directable. Talk a little about that.
Yeah. Well, so as individuals, we come to things with a point of view. We come to things perhaps with an agenda or a philosophy. Organizations are the same. Organizations have philosophy and approach. And I've seen occasions where dollar value, cost, reputational risk, those are things that become front of mind, front of purpose in a number of different types of emergencies. And you can't have that. The victims have to be the number one focus. The survivors and the families of victims have to be given their due. They are not a commodity. They are not chattel. They're not something you use for a human interest story to, hey, see, aren't we great? No, you can't do that. It has to be much more sincere, much more compassionate than that. And most of all, they're not your enemy. If you give them all you got, if you offer the truth, if you're able to say, I don't know that yet, and this is why, because there's questions, sometimes you never answer the question, right? But if you approach the families with compassion, sincerity, and honesty, and recognize that they deserve the best you can give them, then that comes out, it's a better outcome. And the other side of that, of course, is military, Coast Guard. You've got your own families, right? Yes. I put lots of people in harm's way. I briefed families when we were heading out to the first Gulf War, something that Canada hadn't done, since Korea, and lots of questions, and families are frightened, understandably, and in that scenario, you have to commit to keeping them updated. You have to commit to the truth. Yes, you keep the operational secret stuff out, sure, but you can tell a pretty good story. And the other thing you have to remember there is, don't make promises you're not going to keep. Mm-hmm. We're never going to go into the Gulf. It'll be okay. Well, we went right into the Gulf. So a version of honesty that includes, I don't know yet. And that's humble, right? I'm not omnipotent. I can't predict the future, this is what I see as best as I can tell, and this is what we will set up to, to keep you apprised. And, that operation was the foundation for the Canadian Navy creating, a family assistance program that became national, that I think is as good as I've seen anywhere. And I'm very familiar with the U.S. services version. Ours is modeled on that, and it works because we use volunteers and family members who've endured those deployments as enablers, right? And so you have folks who've seen it, done it, have confidence, and that's the kind of investment families deserve.
Fully agree, Roger. There is a high cost of losing personnel when you're in a response. And so if you could talk a little about what that means to you and how you were able to deal with that with your own servicemen that were reporting to you when they were on a location like a Swissair disaster or a major war, something like that.
Yeah, it's. I think it's an important thing for a leader to recognize. No organization can endure not having good people. At the same time, we ask a lot, and we drain batteries, and sometimes we hurt folks, and sometimes folks don't come home, and that all plays in the psyche. Loyalty goes both ways, and an individual's loyalty to the organization can pour out like a river until the day you burn them. Either they've given all they got, or you've not treated them right, and then there's a switch, and that loyalty can disappear in an instant. And you can't defend against every instant of a problem, but what you can do is come at it with a philosophy, a leadership philosophy, an approach to your people that helps avoid that drain, allows folks to catch their breath after they've been burnt out. I mean, we came back from the first Gulf after 7 months, 18 days, 10 hours. And my joke is I wasn't counting. We were burnt out. We were pumped. It was a great accomplishment, but there wasn't a lot of juice left in the tank. And second Gulf War in 2 or 3, when I had a leadership role, I was a task group commander. We went through every ship the Canadian Navy had, and I'm quoted in one of the articles of the day. The Canadian Navy is doggone tired now. Leave it alone for a while. But it comes down to people, right? And so it starts by preparing them for what they're going to see and do, and certainly pre-briefing, understanding things like PTSD, understanding what they're going to see and do on a mission, understanding what that feeling in your gut is as a mental health factor, and what you can do for that. Giving folks a sense that, they don't have to go hide. I don't want to be a mental health injury. They're going to throw me out. Growing the trust that people will be taken care of. One of the things I did with my Coast Guard team, we grew a trauma resiliency program that we gave to all the operators, but we also gave it to the office staff. Why? So they'd understand the weird guy off the ship that walked ashore one day not in a good place, and not pass judgment. And so it was about strengthening the fabric of collegiality and not being afraid that that's catching, but also not being judgmental and writing somebody off. Trust is a tremendously powerful emotion, and lack of it is death for an organization. And so you have to focus on that, see that. We had, I've seen a lot of search and rescues back east, of course, but here in my 9-year watch with Coast Guard, and we had a CISM team, a critical incident stress team, and whenever there was an incident, they'd proactively check in. It wasn't an option. I'll call you if I need you. No, because you may be fine, but your shipmate may not be, and I'm not having you make a decision as to whether they at least get a mission debrief. And because it was an SOP, a standard operating procedure, nobody nobody felt oppressed. Okay, it's the boss's thing, but nobody felt like I'm the guy who wants one, but my shipmates don't, so I'm going to shut up. Nobody was left. You know, those silent voices, right? The loud guy always has the strongest opinion, but you got to cater to the folks that are quiet, sitting in the corner. And whether it's, so what do you think of the pay raise, buddy? Or how are you feeling, buddy? You have to check in with them as well.
Very wise words. It's no doubt Canada had one of the finest leaders in you, Roger, and we are absolutely so blessed to have you on our board and as a senior associate with Go Crisis. Just in the closing few minutes we have together, please share what your goals are in accepting this type of a role with us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first element of me signing on was being able to continue giving back. Did a lot. I know stuff. I made a lot of mistakes, and I think one of the best things I can do for anybody is offer up some wisdom before they go off and make a mistake that I already have. Learn from other people's mistakes. Offer up the wisdom and the experience so they can step off with greater confidence and greater likelihood of getting it right the first time. The other element, Barbara, we talked about it a bit yesterday. There's a lot going on. I mean, you come from the airline industry, and there's a focus on that. I'm a mariner, and I've seen that aspect. But planes, trains, automobiles, storms, whether it's the next tornado. A lot of our hinterland community endured this, and nobody ever knew. It's much more visible now, but it's also demanding the pace and the scope and the volatility that we're seeing. I think demands a much stronger network, a fabric of response capability and shared knowledge. I'm a big believer in community self-reliance, the ability to respond off the bat, to have the common lingo, which we call ICS, but the linkages, because the tornado in the proverbial trailer park is one thing, but what happens when it's larger than that? You look at some of these storms we've had, and the thousands and thousands of people concurrently. A more viable, mechanized, coherent response. I just look up and down my coast and here west, and I see these communities getting stronger. I see them asking questions. I see them looking for training. And I'm glad that chief and council have their plan. There are a couple of communities here, Gitgat is Hartley Bay is probably got the finest response team, fire hall, on water capability of the small communities that I know. And their mindset is, we have to help our neighbors. Well, to help your neighbor, you need to know your neighbor. That community was the one that turned out when the Queen of the North grounded and sank. 15 years ago now. So it's in their nature, and so why would we in this business, would government that's in this line of work, why would we not reach out, connect, offer up whatever we can, starting by asking, what do you need, Chief, and enable to make that fabric even stronger. So that's my thing.
Well, that's wonderful, Roger. And we are so pleased to have you with us. For anyone that would be interested in learning more from Roger, please get in touch with us at info@gocrisis.com. We're happy to share any info with you. Roger, it has been an absolute pleasure, and the time has flown by. Thank you so much for your time today, and let's talk again soon.
Thanks very much. Enjoyed it, and Be well, everyone. Stay safe out there.
Thank you.